Welcome back to Kling of Games. This is the second installment of my Between the Seasons content for my FPS Reset series. Just a little look behind the scenes at what I do between each season of the Dynasty. I hope you're looking forward to Season 3 as much as I am, and that this will hold you over in the meantime. As much as I love NCAA 12, the progression in Dynasty can be a little wonky in some places and a little static in others. So I use the same EADB editor from my video creating the roster to edit things ever so slightly to make it more fun. This means the first step is to plug in my handy USB drive into the Xbox to move my file between the console and my computer. Then I go to my FPS Dynasty. First thing I do is I need to generate a new class of recruits. This is one of the things I edit between seasons, which we'll see later. If I don't generate the class before saving the file, I won't be able to do this. Now I save my file for editing. I also save a copy of the Dynasty at the end of every year for safekeeping, and future experiments that I hope to share later. I had already saved that file by the time I started recording for this, but just keep it in mind for later. Now I can turn off the Xbox and move the USB drive to my computer. I open up Horizon just like before. I find my FPS Reset Dynasty and export the file into my NCAA 12 Dynasty file folder. Then I close Horizon and open up EADB Editor. After it loads, I load my Dynasty configuration file. Then I open up my FPS Reset Dynasty file. Thank God for editing, because this actually takes forever every time. Especially when I try and record my screen at the same time. When it eventually opens, I export the PLAY tab using PGID, the Team tab using TGID, and the COCH tab using CCID. One last tab I export is the DCHT. This is the depth chart tab. It doesn't matter how I export it because there are no unique columns. This is for reference only, as I can only update it manually in the editor. I save them all in their respective folders using some variation of FPS Reset Year 3. If you're confused, please check out my previous video showing how I created my walk-on roster. I plan on this video just being a quick overview of what I do and how I do it, and less of a deep dive into the editor. We start with the coaches. I head to my coaches folder and open up the file I created called Coach Recruit Focus. After it opens and I enable the content, I open up the FPS Reset file we just exported. I select all the data in the export file and copy it. Then I paste it over the existing data in my Recruit Focus file. The basic purpose of this file is to use each coach's playbook and tendencies to make sure they target the right kind of recruit. In NCAA 12, every coach is set to recruit every position at the highest priority and accept any tendency for their recruits, but this just isn't realistic. This can cause triple option teams to go after 5-star pocket passers, or for an air raid offense to have a line of run blockers. Needless to say, that irks me. So this is my way of fixing it. I made a table for offense and a table for defense. In these tables, I assigned the interest level and tendency for each position based on the type of playbook used. To the best of my understanding anyway. For instance, pro style and option teams will make running backs a high priority, while air raid teams will ignore them. Or for the tendency, 3-4 defenses will look for run-stopping defensive ends, while a 4-3 defense will look for pass rushers. This should make the CPU recruiting more realistic and make their teams fit the schemes they try to run. I also have some positions listed as 9 on my table. That basically means my program will change the tendency based on the coach's run-pass balance. Coaches that run more than average will look for run blockers and vice versa. Coaches that look to stop the run will look for run stoppers and vice versa. That way, not every pro-style or spread team will look the same. I think the game is more fun this way, instead of the normal vanilla recruiting. I run my code and all the coaches have their own interests and priorities. After it finishes running, I highlight all the data in the table. Copy it, paste it over my exported coaches file, then save it. Done with coaches. Now that we have our coaches done, we're going to move on to teams. I move over to my teams folder in my workspace and open up my file FPS Reset Offseason Teams. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it helps keep me organized. When this is open, I open the coaches tab. Then I copy all my new coach data again and paste it into my teams folder. Once that's in place, I save and close my coaches file. But before I open my Teams export file, I have to make a copy of it. This is important because there's one column in the Teams folder that Excel messes with. I don't know the purpose of it, but it's a really long string of numbers, and Excel keeps converting it into scientific notation, which makes it impossible to import to the editor. Luckily, I found a workaround to this, but it requires me to keep one version of the file that Excel hasn't touched. With that established, I sort all the teams by conference and division. Truthfully, I don't think I need to do this anymore, but it's just become part of my process. Then I copy all the data from my Teams export and paste it into my editing sheet. The first thing I do with this data is replace the championship contender rankings for every team using my custom formula. Basically, I add up the championships won for every team. Conference championships plus national championships times 3. I then set a maximum ranking, which is currently 2 because we're only 2 seasons in. I'll increase that as we go. Then for every school, I divide their score by the maximum and then multiply it by the max ranking. I copy this column and paste it over the championship contender for the teams. I do something similar for team prestige. For this one, I use 3 separate rankings to find the team prestige. These rankings are all-time win percentage, bowl wins, and championships won. The championships won is the same. The winning percentage and the bowl wins are calculated the same way, and then I average the 3 rankings together. Divide each team's cumulative score by the max, and then distribute the scores between 1 and my max score. Again, I copy this column and I paste it over the program prestige columns for each team. The rest of the rankings I'm letting progress naturally for now. Once the players start leaving for the NFL and I play Madden, I'll create something to edit the pro potential rankings. But that's in the future. The last thing I do for teams is run my team playbooks macro. This is a pretty simple code. It basically just records the playbook for every head coach and the team they coach for. Then it goes through all the teams and makes the offensive playbooks and defensive playbooks match the coach. It also sets the huddle style based on the playbook. For the huddle style, I just use the huddle style for the base game to set it. Bada bing bada boom, playbook set for every team. With that done, I copy all the data and paste it into my CSV file. Lastly, I have to use a different program that I found called Modern CSV to fix the column that Excel broke. It's a program that is only used to edit CSV files and doesn't change the long number strings into exponential format. I open up my edited copy of the team CSV and my unedited copy. Then I sort both files by team ID and copy the broken column into my edited version. With that done, I just make sure my header rows are at the top, then save and close. Done with teams. Done with editing teams anyway. I still use my team editing file to determine the stadium rankings. I rank them the simplest way I can. I don't take attendance into the equation at all. It's all determined by home win percentage, with some randomness for tiebreakers. First things first, I copy the team's IDs and stadium IDs into a sheet I made just for ranking stadiums. Then I copy in the home win percentage. I have a column with a formula to find this in my team editing file, so it's just another simple copy and paste. Then I just need to copy a formula I have saved to add an extremely small fraction to the win percentage just to iron out ties. I sort the sheet by my new column, and that gives me the ranking for all the stadiums. Unfortunately, the EADB editor doesn't play nice with the stadium CSV, so I have to enter this information manually for each stadium, which I will do off screen because it's very tedious. So let's just move on to the player numbers. I gave a preview of this in my video on how I made the walk-on roster, but I've made a couple changes to the program, small tweaks to improve efficiency. I will admit that I had some issues when I ran it the first time and it caused numbers to not update, which is why all my freshmen had such boring numbers in the spring game. This will correct that and they will appear with different numbers for Season 3. To start with, I open my player's CSV file and copy in all the data into my random number Excel sheet. Then it's as simple as running my macro. What this macro does is it runs through every player and checks if they are a true freshman. It does this by checking if the year and redshirt columns are both 0. If they are, it does nothing. If they are not, it records the player's numbers as taken in either the offensive or defensive matrix depending on the position. Once it goes through all the players, it goes back to the top and does it again. This time it looks for true freshmen and sets a random number based on the position. Every time it finds a number that can work for the player's position, it checks if the number is available for the player's team. If it is, it sets the number for the player. If it is not, it finds a new number. And it does this until it runs out of players to check. That's the long and short of it. So let's run the program. Once it's done, I copy all the data and paste it over my CSV file. Then I save and close it. Now, let's do the recruits. So to start, I open up my recruit manip Excel file and my recruit export CSV. Then, just like every other file type I've done, I copy the data from my CSV to my editing file. Now, the way I edit the recruits is I run 4 macros, starting with the first one, random recruits. This macro does exactly what it sounds like. It randomizes the stats for every recruit, based on an average and standard deviation for every position. I found these values based on the freshmen in the base roster, then I tweaked them just a bit to make it more fun. With some testing, of course. I'm not going Wild West out here. After it sets all the stats, it calculates the overall using the same multipliers I used to create my roster. Then it determines the tendency for the player based on the position. This is something I'm going to continue to fine-tune because I don't think it's quite finished yet. After that, it changes the build of the players based on the previous weight compared to the new weight. For athletes, it does something pretty fun, in my humble opinion. At the beginning of the loop, it sets a secondary position for athletes from a table I made. Then, for every stat, it randomly selects one of the positions to set the stats, so we get some really crazy recruits, like, hypothetically, a 2-star cornerback athlete with 99 break tackle. Good times. So I run the program and get a bunch of randomized recruits. Next up, I need to make the names more fun. The base recruits and players have pretty generic names, all things considered. You consistently see multiple players with the same name. So what I did was I made a list of every player currently playing in the NCAA and NFL, along with all the names NCAA 12 generated. With that list, I found all the unique names and how many times they appear. Then I made a macro that goes through every player and generates them a new name. It randomly generates a number between the max and min name count. Then it runs through every name until it hits a number greater than the random one. It then uses that name. I also added a check to see if the name is short enough to add a suffix. Then I do the same thing with the random number, but the chances of getting a suffix are very, very small. Now I run my program and everyone gets a new name. Next, it's time to make sure the class isn't too good for where we are as a league. I do this by replacing a percentage of the top recruits with walk-on players. It's pretty similar to my random recruits program, but instead of replacing every player, it only replaces a certain amount, which I set as a percentage of the recruits in a separate sheet. Then I have 3 ways of determining which players are replaced by walk-ons: replacing the top players, replacing the bottom players, and replacing random players. Basically, this just changes how I sort the players before replacing them. If I replace the top players, it sorts overalls highest to lowest. If I replace the bottom players, I sort overalls lowest to highest. And if I replace random players, I put random values in a new column and replace the players based on that. It's relatively simple. Then it runs through the recruits until it hits the number and sets the stats between the high and low for each position. It uses the same numbers I used to create my roster. Currently, I am only using this option to replace top players. In a couple seasons, I'll probably progress to the random recruits. Also, last season I replaced the top 65% of recruits with walk-ons. This season I'm reducing that to 52%. I think that's a pretty good progression. There will still be some star freshmen, but we won't get too many players who will instantly dominate the league. So I run my program and we have replaced the top players with walk-ons. Fun, right? The problem is that now the players' rankings do not reflect their skills at all, which brings us to the final macro. Re-rank and re-star. This program starts by sorting the sheet by position, ranking, and athlete. Then it creates a new sheet, copies the recruit ID, hometown, and state, and pastes them into a new sheet. This is important because it keeps the player interest realistic. I have to make sure the rankings, player ID, and location match, or we could see some crazy results. Like a 5-star from Wyoming who is only interested in the bottom Florida teams, hypothetically. After it keeps those values safe, it creates a new column with the random recruits. In that column, it multiplies the overall by random numbers between 0.93 and 1.07. This is just so that the rankings don't 100% match the overalls. That would be really boring. This way we have gems and stars. I also added negative multipliers for a player's age and certain positions, namely fullback and the kickers. That way, for instance, we don't see a 5-star junior kicker, or something like that. Once it has the column populated for all players, it sorts the sheet by that column from highest to lowest. Then it goes through every player and assigns their position rank, overall rank, and star rank. For the star ranking, I have a certain number of 5 stars, 4 stars, etc. The program assigns the 5 stars until it hits that limit, then it starts assigning 4 stars until the same thing happens, all the way down to 1 stars. I also made sure to include position rankings for just athletes, otherwise there will be less mystery with them, and I love mystery. After it assigns all the position rankings, it sorts the sheet again by position, ranking, and athlete. But this time, it pastes the recruiting ranking, hometown, and state that we saved earlier, and deletes the new sheet to close everything out. So we run the program, and voila, we have our recruits re-ranked and ready to go. So I copy my new recruits over my CSV file, and save and close both. And that is everything I do for the new season in Excel. So it's time to reopen the EADB editor, load the Dynasty configuration file, and load my FBS Reset Dynasty file. First up, we import my players file, get the players their fancy new numbers. Next, we import the teams, and we import the coaches. And finally, import the new and improved, or the opposite of improved in some cases, recruiting class. After I save, I have one more thing to do. Edit the depth chart to make sure the returning award winners are starting. This is a pretty tedious process. I have to find the player ID for every award winner. Then I have to search the depth chart for that player ID and make sure they are starting. To make it easier, I export the award winners tab in Excel so I can do it side by side. When I find the player ID, I check the DDEP column and make sure they are listed as 0. If they are not, I move every other player down 1 and place the player at 0. I would love to automate this, but the depth chart tab can't be imported into the editor because there are no unique columns. So this is what I'm left with. I won't make you sit through the whole thing, I think you get the idea. When I get done, I save the file in the editor and close. Now that it's edited and saved, the only thing left to do is move the file back to the Xbox, so I open up Horizon once again. I open up my FPS Reset Dynasty file in Horizon, and I replace it with the file we just edited. I save, rehash, and resign the file, then I close Horizon, and I eject my memory stick. Then I insert the memory stick to the Xbox and open up NCAA 12. After I get through the intro, I select hard drive as the memory option. This is so that my normal profile and setting get loaded. Then I go to Play Career and select Dynasty. In the Dynasty menu, I change the device to USB storage, and I open up FPS Reset. I check the team to make sure everything is correct. You can tell right away with the numbers changed with JD Purcell, meaning that we're good to go. So I can go to Save Dynasty, change the device to the hard drive, and save over my old FPS Reset, and we are good to go to start Season 3. Fun, right? Anyway, I've been Klinga Games. I hope you enjoyed the video despite the lack of football happening. Season 3 will start in 2 weeks. I hope you're as excited as I am. I'll see you then.